Monsieur Anber.
Monsieur Cassaman, how are you, brother?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. And something a little different. Usually we have our guests wait, but our favorite guest, or at least our most regular guest, and our good friend John Iceman, John Scully, is already here with us this evening as we have another edition of Calling Russ Anber because there's a lot to get to this week, Russ. I don't know if you agree or not, but we figured it was a good chance and a good opportunity to talk to Scully here. So good evening, gentlemen. Hope everybody's doing okay.
All good, all good.
Beep, beep.
Beep, beep.
Yes, indeed.
Look, I don't know where exactly we can start off with the amount of action this past weekend. We'll get to the Jake Paul, Ben Askren fiasco a bit later in the Floyd Mayweather news that came out this week. There's some fights, actual legitimate fights with Navarrete fighting this weekend as well for the featherweight title. But this past weekend, Demetrius Andrade was the one that I think kind of probably resonated the most with the boxing community for a middleweight title defense against a very tough and rugged Liam Williams. Andrade scores a knockdown early in the fight. It looks like he couldn't even maybe stop Williams, but similar to Andrade's pattern, he kind of slows down at some points in some of the rounds. Williams fought back, but I think overall a very good display for Andrade. But your first impressions when you looked at that fight, because some people are saying this is the type of result that's going to maybe attract fighters in the middleweight division like he wants because he may have looked vulnerable at times, and others will say, this style is just too dangerous and too awkward for the big names to step up and fight him.
I'm going to let Scully lead on this because he knows Andrade from a long time ago. When we first met Andrade, I first met Andrade when we came down to a show that Scully put on, an amateur show, and they were looking for an opponent for him. And he was like, what, 13 years old, maybe, Scully?
13, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll let you speak on him. And I told that story to Demetrius as well. I said, I've known you.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah,
that was October of 2003. It was at my high school, Windsor High School.
Right.
And my plan was to put David Lemieux with Demetrius Andrade that night. That was going to be the fight. And,
right.
Whatever happened, and they were both there, but David ended up fighting Prince, my boy Prince, Neil. And Andrade didn't take the fight or whatever. But, I know Demetrius since that back then. His brother actually was really good, Michael Andrade. Michael was like the first in the family. He was like a good fighter. And then Demetrius was a kid and he came after him. I think, Demetrius is obviously good. He's very good. I think, he's probably not, how do I say it? Like personality wise, I think he's not, I think he tries a little too hard to be like charismatic, and I don't think it's not really natural to me. And I don't know if that's a factor, but his style is like, he's good. He's obviously good. We know he's good. He can fight. He's slick. He's all that stuff. But the average fans, that's not what they're drawn to. He kind of reminds me in a way of when Michael Nunn was first coming up, and they were they didn't want to see him. And then when he knocked out like Colin Bay and Curtis Parker and Frank Tate. Then all of a sudden it was a big thing. But until then, when he beat Alex Ramos and he boxed, I thought it was great. But, the fans, they were turned off by it. I think Demetrius is kind of like what we were saying earlier. Like he's a big risk style-wise. You're not going to look great against him. Unless you catch him quick, you're not going to pick him apart. You know what I mean? And bang on him. You know what I mean? You may get him later and get him tired and like Leonard did to Hearns type of thing, but you're not just going to beat him up. Like he's slick, he's fast, he's young, he's got that enthusiasm about him. So I think he's a high risk and probably not, a huge reward.
Low reward. Yeah. Listen, I think in terms of boxing, I spoke with him after the fight and we talked about it, and I thought that sometimes in the fight, I thought that he more so let he more so let Williams back into the fight, by starting to retreat and trying to backpedal. And I said, well, as soon as you started that backpedaling stuff, you just gave Williams the momentum to come forward, and then you were dealing with a freight train coming at you. When you stood your ground and you said, okay, let's go. If you want to come into this perimeter, I'm not taking a step back, but you want to come into this perimeter, you're getting hit if you enter this perimeter, you know? When you held your ground, Williams was really
but wait.
at a loss of how to solve that. And then when he started backing Williams up, like with the knockdown, he just stood there and he fired a 1-2, boom, boom. He didn't backpedal. He just held his ground. The kid almost walked into it, bang, down. You know, and we talked about that. And I told him, I said, you've got all the stuff to be a real skilled old school fighter. And he said, what do you mean? I said, there's lots of guys that really look good defensively when they're away from their opponent. You know, they can lean away and get away. And you say, oh, there's a hard guy to hit. But the real true skill of a great defensive fighter is somebody who can stay right in the pocket, right on the inside, and you can't hit him with a handful of rice. That's a defensive genius. You know, that's somebody. And Canelo can do that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Canelo, John Ryder does that very well. UK fighter does that very well. And so, you know, we laughed about that. But I think, listen, overall, you could just see there was levels to it. And he was just a little level above, I think, on Liam. Liam brought a lot of heart, and he tried to talk himself into the fight at the end of every round. He tried to build that confidence, and Andrade stayed cool. I kind of like that cool approach about him. When he's in the ring, he can stay cool, but I guess to some, you know, they might take it as a turnoff, but I think that he stays cool under fire.
But Russ, just for a second, you for the fight itself with Andrade, because you talked about how he stood his ground, and there you thought that's where he had the most success, but he did so for so much of the first half of the bout and threw everything at Williams. I just think at one point the pace for him was to more earnestly move around because it looked like he wasn't going to be able to get him out of there. I don't think he could have stood his ground for 12 complete rounds against a guy like Williams. I think he had to move around a little bit at some point to kind of change it up because nothing he was doing offensively for the pace, I'm saying, would have knocked Williams out. It looks like Williams was just an iron chin in that fight, even though he was hurt repeatedly.
But that's fine. But I mean, you know, as the champion of the world, and I think, Scully, you'll agree with this, you know, as the champion of the world, as a middleweight, okay, so you're not knocking him out. But if you're banging on the guy and you've got to bang on him for 12 rounds, well, you just keep banging on him. What can you do? You know, like you can't say, I'm going to stop throwing punches because I might get tired. You know, that shouldn't be the strategy going in, right?
Marvin Hagler wouldn't do that. You know, like.
But at one point, Andrade, with the all action he was doing, he was getting timed by Williams, and he got buzzed a little bit as well. I think that's why he started to retreat a little bit because he said, if I can't knock this guy out, and I'm fighting toe to toe with him, and he's actually now more of a threat to me because I'm tiring maybe a little bit, maybe not as sharp defensively. I'm getting caught a little bit with some counter shots because Williams at one point won some rounds. So, anyways, that's why I think why the strategy of Andrade was to move around a little bit because now he felt less threatened by Williams if he moved around.
Matthew, I think this what you're saying. I mean, obviously it's on memory. I watch it. Everything you're saying is right, but I think that happened. All that happened every time he took his foot off the gas and started backpedaling and let Williams come to him. So all the success, that's why I say all the success I thought Williams had, I think Andrade contributed to that success by letting him back in. You know, I think at some point his size, his power, the ability that he was, the facility in which he was able to hit Williams, I think lended to the fact that you either hold your ground or keep backing this guy up. And if he tries to come in and back you up, you've got to nail him. You can't just let him walk in and hit you. So I thought he gave up too much ground, which gave real estate to Williams that he shouldn't have gotten. Scully?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, like there's, as they say, there's levels to it, and maybe Demetrius at this point, he hasn't had that fight or those fights against the highest level. And it's kind of showing. I think he's kind of, I don't know if I'm saying he's missing something or he's not using something. He doesn't have to use it necessarily. He doesn't feel the desperation to use it. He's not using everything that he has, and he can win against certain levels of guys, but against Canelo, guys like that, he's going to have to, he can't backpedal and let Canelo take the play. That wouldn't work.
Yeah, that's right.
When you look at the picture at the middleweight division, let's say for a second Canelo stays at 168, fighting Billy Joe Saunders in a few weeks, and either stays at 168, moves up to 175. The 160-pound division, it's Triple G who's still there. It's Andrade. It's Jamal Charlo, and maybe Murata, depending, not as known and not as high profile, but skillful Japanese title holder. I think if Andrade were to fight Triple G, that's the fight probably to make at the moment, or Charlo even. But now Triple G apparently says he wants to fight Murata later in the fall. And
what fall? They were talking about December.
Right,
December. Like, what is December?
Why isn't Triple G, who's with the zone, Andrade with the zone, isn't that kind of the fight to make to see, okay, is Triple G still the best guy in the division, or is his decline going to mean that he's near the end and Andrade can now take over and be the middleweight guy?
Well, let me ask Scully. Let me rephrase the question and ask Scully, who right now for 20 seconds can act as the manager of Triple G, and you come to him with a contract to fight Andrade. You taking the fight, Scully?
Nah. I mean, because it's difficult. It's difficult.
Yeah.
And he could make Triple G look slow. He could make him look all these things. And the reward is not there. It's just not there. And, and the thing is, Triple G has been so inactive. Like, since he fought Canelo, I don't even know. I think he fought once, right? Just maybe one time.
Right.
I actually thought he was retired. Okay, twice, but I thought he was retired. I actually thought he had retired. So yeah, you're gonna have to be a little, now granted, a few years ago, I wouldn't have thought anything of fighting Demetrius. But at this point, timing is everything. Sure. And the timing would be on Demetrius' side for sure.
It's funny that we talk about, guys fighting, how often they fight, once a year, twice a year. Out of curiosity, I have one boxing question that has intrigued me my entire life, and nobody has been able to give me a real definitive answer, including Ron Katz, including Bruce Trampler, Russell Peltz. No one's been able to give me the definitive answer on this, and I don't know who's still alive who possibly could. But you remember when Roberto Duran beat Ken Buchanan for the lightweight title, right?
Yeah.
And we know how controversial that was. It was a low blow, Do you realize that after the Duran fight, which was in June 26th, Ken Buchanan fought 3 more fights in the next 6 months, and 2 of them were one was against Carlos Ortiz and the other one was against Jim Watt. Those were 2 after fighting Duran. So if you include Duran and you make it for 7 months, he fought Duran, Carlos Ortiz, Jim Watt, and somebody else in the space of 7 months. And then after the Duran, and he won them, and after the Duran fight, including the fights I just mentioned, he had 13 straight wins and never got another shot at Roberto Duran.
Where are you going with this? What's the question, Russ?
How do you not get, what do you mean, where am I going? It's obvious. How do you not get a shot after such a controversial ending?
Right.
And you're a contender, like you're the champion of the world. You just lost your title. You don't get the rematch against Roberto Duran after a controversial ending.
Wasn't Duran in other divisions, Scully? Wasn't he up now weight classes afterwards by the time you
Nah, he stayed. But look,
what are you talking? He's 21 years old.
Right. And here's the thing. Right afterwards, he more than proves worthy of a rematch with the guys he beat.
Yeah, so, exactly.
That's he was not sought after. They were not looking to fight Mr. Buchanan.
Yeah, Ken Buchanan could fight his ass off. And I always wondered, how could there never have been a clamoring for that type of rematch? Like, that wouldn't happen today on a kind of an ending like that, that you don't get the rematch, and he didn't. And it would have been very interesting. And the guy remained a successful lightweight for years and never got another shot at Roberto Duran. We digress, of course, but I thought that was just to show you the kind of caliber and the kind of guys, how often they fought then. You come off a fight with Duran. Now, that fight was a blood and guts fight. Like, that was a hard fight. Like, there was a very grueling fight at lightweight for Ken Buchanan. For both of them, it was a hard fight. He fought 3 fights in the next 6 months.
That's not happening today.
No.
Nobody's doing that today.
No.
maybe not hard fights, but and what about in Triple G? Speaking of inactivity, Scully thinking he's almost retired. He's had 3 fights since the Canelo Alvarez fight, because the Steve Rolls, which was the last time I was in the Hall of Fame, the last time not I was in the Hall of Fame, but at the Hall of Fame weekend induction in Canastota in 2019, he fought Steve Rolls. Then he fought Dorochenko, and lastly Kamril Zaramata, I believe his last name was, where Triple G was winning. But if he doesn't fight Andrade, then Scully, and you don't take that fight, who's Triple G fighting that DAZN wants to pay for?
I mean, who knows? Like, and that's the thing, like with the politics and the TV affiliations, like this guy can't fight that guy because he's with this television network, and it's hard to keep track. And I honestly don't keep track. Like, I don't know who's with who, because I don't care. Like, I just care. I want to see certain guys fight. Like, I would love to see him fight Charlo. I don't know if there's a network discrepancy there or not that would hold it up. But I'd like to see somebody fight Charlo at a high level.
Yeah, Charlo for sure.
Absolutely.
Who was also in the news this week for Mark Breland being in camp with Ronnie Shields and Jamal Charlo. I don't know if you saw that, Joe. And Jamal Charlo with Ronnie Shields, those one of the trainer-coach combinations. I believe they've been together since the amateur days, or at least since the professional ranks. Jermell Charlo has changed trainers, but Jamal and Ronnie Shields, I mean, adding Mark Breland probably has him, I would think, under the best tutelage, among the best trainers in the world of boxing right now.
Go, Scully. I'll let you lead with that, and I'll finish it.
Well, is there a question, or?
My point is, what your question is, like, if you have Breland to a camp that already has Ronnie Shields, you think it's just, do you know if there have any rapport between the two men, or is it, do you think something just to add Breland's experience to an already, veteran trainer in Ronnie Shields?
Yeah, I mean, there might be some aspect of the game that they feel Mark is, is good at, it's his strong point, and they want to add that to it. But it's not bad publicity, especially with the whole Wilder situation. It's different dynamics. So I'd have to hear from them and what their thinking is, why they want Mark specifically.
See, I know Ronnie very well, and I like to think I can call him a friend, and I know that if we crossed each other in the street, he'd say, "Hey, Rod, what's happening?" And I'd say, "Hey, Roddy, what's happening?" We would talk, and I like Ronnie Shields, and I have a lot of respect for him as a trainer, as a former fighter. I think he understands the game. I like his personality and his dynamic and what he teaches. I have a lot of respect and a lot of time for somebody like Ronnie Shields, and I think Ronnie Shields appreciates where Mark Breland comes from. I think Ronnie Shields appreciates the humbleness. I think Ronnie Shields appreciates that Mark is kind of the guy that, walks softly and carries a big stick kind of thing, like he when he says something, it means something. When he tells you something, it means something. It's coming from somebody, who's been down that road, not just somebody saying something. This is somebody who's been there. And maybe sometimes the youngins need to have that kind of guy around, and sometimes Ronnie is not the guy to deliver. So now you've got somebody there that possibly can enforce any messages that Ronnie needs enforcing. So I think it could be a good dynamic. I mean, I don't know Jamel well enough to be able to speak on it to see what kind of compatibility it could be. When I have met both the brothers, they've been nothing but nice. They've been really nice to me. I've had zero issues with them whatsoever. And I hope they realize that, they got somebody there in Breland who, he's quiet, but if you get to know him and you get to hear the stories and understand where he's come from, what he's achieved, just learning that will make you better. Knowing those things will make you better. And sometimes I think that's what I feel younger fighters are lacking today, is not understanding where it's as if they experience something for the first time. I find it very, very hard to believe, and Scully, you tell me if I'm wrong, I find it very hard to believe that something happens in the game of boxing today to a fighter at any level that hasn't already happened to somebody else before.
Right. Of course,
right?
100%.
Of course. So if you can learn from that and have that knowledge, you've just become that much better. So if they can learn from what Ronnie and that's a lot of boxing rounds in having Ronnie Shields and Mark Breland together.
Well, you know what a dynamic of that is, like me personally, like I always say, you're a great example of a guy who wasn't a pro, but you did an apprenticeship. Like you learned the game inside out from some high quality people. You know what I mean? And
Right.
that's important. Now, me, I'm different. Like I use my boxing experience to help train guys. So sometimes I'll be training a guy, and I can literally watch him, the way his facial expression changes during a round. I can tell you what he's thinking, and I'll tell him what he's thinking, and his eyes will get real big, and he'll be like, how in the world could you know that? And I said, because I've been there. I know what you're thinking, because I thought the same crazy thing that you're thinking now. So there's different dynamics of it. Different trainers, like Eddie Futch. He was laid back and calm, and he didn't bring dynamics to the corner, but maybe Freddie Roach did as a under trainer. So Mark brings a different look, a different experience, and I'm sure Charlo knows who he is in terms of even with fighters. It's important when a guy was a great amateur, like a legendary amateur. You don't get more legendary than Mark as far as that goes. So he knows there's a lot of untapped knowledge there that Mark can relate to him and that he'll understand as a fighter. So I'm interested to see what Mark says about it, and what they all say about it, about the the training and what their dynamic is.
I'm happy for him. I'm happy. And you know what? I'll even make it a point to give him a call and see if we can't get him on here. He doesn't usually like to do this kind of stuff, but and we'd have to turn up the volume so you can hear him whisper. But I'd like to get him on here and talk about it, because there's a bunch of stories there. That's for sure.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We'll definitely try that, Russ. And speaking of legendary fighters who are now trainers, Roy Jones this past Saturday was in the corner of Brian Perella as the trainer now. And for Roy, in that fight for Perella against Tony Harrison in the junior middleweight division, disputed draw. I don't know, Russ, what stood out to you or John or Scully here from that fight. And of course, Russ, also seeing Roy kind of now you being in his corner for his fights the last few years, and now he's a coach. You trade any insight? Do you talk to him at all about the fight or since?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I talked to him at length to congratulate. I texted him right after, because I told him they robbed you in this one. You won that fight.
You want to say robbery? You're going that far.
Well, robbery. Okay, then that's a generic term I use in boxing.
Disputed decision. I mean,
he won the fight. I mean, I don't think it was a fight to say, it was close enough to go either way. No, it was close, but Perella won the fight. I mean, he won the fight. It was close, yeah, but it wasn't, well, it could have gone either way, knock him, sock him, drag out. No, he won the fight. And I said to him, I said, Roy, if you'd have called me and told me, Russ, what do you think about Brian Perella fighting Tony Harrison? I said, I would have told you not to take the fight. And he said, I know. He said, I told Brian, he said, that we're the only two people who think we can win this fight. He said, everybody thinks we're crazy. I said, yeah. He says, but I knew the kid could win. He said, Russ, I knew the kid could win. And he says, I'm crazy. And then he used a few certain expletives followed by that crazy, and he believed he could win. And I'll tell you, and I said this to Roy as well. I've worked with Roy in the corner, not him as a fighter, but he's been coach for certain fighters. And I'll tell you what, when we're walking from the dressing room and you're walking with Roy Jones, even though he's the trainer, there, just as the cut man, there is a certain aura of invincibility that you feel because you're walking with Roy Jones. Scully, I'm sure, knows exactly what I'm talking about. There's a sense of invincibility that you feel when you're walking with him, much in the same way, when you walk with Arthur Beterbiev, your chances are feeling pretty good. You're coming out on top.
Yeah.
You got the horse, right? You got the horse.
Yeah. Well, not just that, but you're with someone who is
a winner.
In boxing term, like unusual. You're with an unusual, member of our community. Historically,
rare.
like Roy is a different level. And I've seen guys. Incidentally, I had a friend of mine on the internet and I think you were there, Russ. It was at your store, Rival in Las Vegas. This kid, he's on the internet. He loves Roy Jones. He idolizes Roy Jones. And I told him I was doing an event at your gym and your store in Las Vegas. And he said, man, I live in California. If I come over, can I meet Roy Jones? Now, this guy's like in his he's not a kid. He's like closer to 30. I said, oh, man, if you can make it over, you'll meet Roy for sure. He goes, I mean, he's my idol. So he comes over to your store. And I tell Roy, I go, listen, man, this kid, he's your idol. He came all the way from California. Can you do me a favor and talk to him a little bit? And I've never seen this before. Roy went over and talked to him. This guy, who's not a kid, he's a grown man. He was looking up at Roy, and his mouth was open, and he was just staring with his eyes like this. And he listened to every word. And I'm looking at him, and I'm like laughing to myself. I go, this kid is seeing Santa Claus for the first time. Like I said, this is awesome. Like Roy has this grown man, like in his presence, and the guy feels Roy's presence. And now that was like 5 years ago. I talk to the kid all the time, and he thanks me to this day. If I talk to him, he goes, hey man, I just want to thank you again. Like that was the moment of my life, meeting Roy Jones and having him talk to me like that. I'll never forget you for that. And, so that's the kind of aura Roy Jones is carrying with him,
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. There is something special about that. And you walk with him and, all these people are looking at him legendary, like, and larger than life. And I'm arguing with him about who I think would have won this fight and who would have won that fight. And we're just arguing and talking to him like a regular guy. It's something special, when you can do that. And that's fun. He's so he believed they could win, and they should have won. And I asked them, I said it looked blatantly obvious that it's almost as if they wanted Perella to lose because they wanted to end his contract, and release him, and they wanted to bring Harrison back and figured, this has got to be the comeback fight for Harrison, like after losing the title, it's got to be the comeback fight for him. And Perella surprised them. So, he prolongs his career, and he is what his nickname is. He's a good fella. Yeah. He's a nice kid. He's a good guy, believes in himself. He trusted Roy, and I'm happy for the kid. He's one of the good guys in the game. I thought he got jobbed a little bit in his last fight, in which he was stopped with 1 second left to go in the fight. And the reason, I don't know if you saw it, Scully, but he's winning the fight, and he's won like every round. Last couple of rounds, he's starting to get tired, and he's getting tagged a little bit. He's starting to get tired. The other kid's coming on, and he's hitting him, he's getting him to him. And in the last round, boom, he drops him, hurts him, drops him. He gets back up, boom, fights. Oh, dropped again. But the second drop wasn't as bad as the first one. And he gets back up, and the ref counts, and it was Jack Reese. Jack counts, finishes the count. The kid's up with his hands up. He tells the kid, step this way. And the kid steps over there. He says, step this way. And the kid steps, he says, walk to me. And he walks to him, and he executes every instruction that Jack wanted. And then Jack waved the fight off with a second left in the round. A second. And he had won every round of the fight. That's heartbreaking, to mentally come back from that. And he did. So, kudos to the kid. He deserved it.
Well, before we get to some of the comments we had actually from a former, and actually not a former, but a current boxing judge in Benoit Roussel to address the 10-10 scorecards situation. I want to get to that in a second, Russ, but before I get to it, the last fights, if we can call it that, from this past weekend, we had Regis Progress against Ivan Redkach, with Redkach having a late entry with the Oscars coming up this weekend for acting performance in the fight that ended up being a technical knockout victory for Progress, but at the time a technical decision. And then the Jake Paul, Ben Askren fiasco. I don't know where you guys want to start. Do you want to start with the real fight between Progress and Redkach, or do you want to have a stab right away at the Jake Paul, Ben Askren knockout?
We'll talk real boxing first. So, I think it's too bad the fight had to end the way it did. And that Redkach did that. Look, Redkach can be accused of doing a lot of things, but he's always, in all the time I've been with him, in all the times I've seen him in the gym, in the fights, in the sparring, he's always shown heart. You know, he's always been there to fight. He trains hard. He loves boxing. He loves being in California and being part of the boxing scene there. He prides himself, even going back to his days as an amateur, of being a Ukrainian Mexican. You know, he loves that, being called a Ukrainian Mexican, you know, and he used to wear the Mexican flag. And, you know, he really loves being that style of fighter. To see him do what he did, in which was obviously not a low blow. You know, if he was, I'd be the first one here to defend him if it was a low blow, but you know, it wasn't. And I'm surprised, because he's a good puncher. He throws, he's got skills, he works hard. You know, it wasn't by any stretch of the imagination an easy night for Prograis, but it's too bad it had to end that way. Took a little bit of the shine off of the win in what was a competitive fight, and at least a real boxing match. What upset me the most in all that, and I know this has nothing to do with the fight, but it was, well, the controversy when it ended, you know, the messages started coming up on Twitter about, oh, you know, it wasn't a low blow, that was robbery, that was this, and people started answering saying they didn't care. They didn't give a shit. They don't care. Stop talking about it. We don't want to hear the commentators talk about it. Let's get the real fight in the ring. And that was, you know, I thought that was just a sad thing. But, you know, it is what it is. These are the people that are buying the pay-per-view. They're the ones, they bought it for that. They didn't buy it for Red Catch and Prograis. They bought it for the fiasco that followed. Scully?
Yeah, that's where we're at. You know, and it's just, you know, it's bizarre that we're at this point, you know, where, like I say, and I said before the fight, you know, I put up a status on social media and I got a lot of feedback. And I was saying how, if you know me, you'll know I could never train that YouTube guy. Paul? I could never train him, because I couldn't be the guy to say, oh, you know, he could be a champion and he could beat this guy. And, you know, I'd have to be realistic. And I don't think they want that. You know, they want the hype and they want the unrealisticness. You know, they want people to watch that believe he can knock out a horse and he can knock out Godzilla, you know, and that he's a freaking terror. He's a machine. And I know people who believe that, you know. Now, I don't fault the kid for trying or anything like that. You know, he's trying. But, you know, when they start saying that, you know, they're shooting for Canelo and things like that, I mean, that's just, it's embarrassing. Like, it's embarrassing to think he could even shine Canelo's shoes for him as a favor, you know. So when that kind of stuff starts, I know that they're getting away from my ideals. You know, they're getting away from my level of mentality. And, you know, it's hard to watch boxing come into, you know, turn to this. It's kind of weird for me.
You know, I got to agree with you. And I came to the defense of the Logan Pauls and the Jake Pauls, you know, wanting to do this. I came to their defense in saying, you know, boxing has allowed this to happen for years. You know, like, anybody can get into boxing. The fact that anybody can apply for a permit and they likely will get licensed even with zero credentials. Like, having never fought as an amateur, they would get a professional license, which that in and of itself is asinine when you just think about that in those terms.
Not every commission would do that though, Russ. Not every commission will grant you a license without even an amateur record.
But none should. Like,
it doesn't matter if it's every commission. As long as one does, you're a professional. You just have to find the most obscure commission to grant you a license.
But you know what? Not even obscure. I mean, I understand about the money, but think about it at its base. Conor McGregor, with no boxing experience, fought the best fighter on the planet. Like, there's no one else that they would let do that. You know, they need a guy to generate 150 million or whatever, and all of a sudden it's okay. Like, if there was ever any proof needed that money rules everything, well, there you go. Because it's bizarre.
Not only that, they let the fighters change the rules on the size of the gloves they could wear. Like try doing that, saying, you know what? I'm not fighting in 10s. I'm fighting in 8s.
Right.
Okay,
right.
no problem. Really?
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's why it kind of like, sometimes I won't name specific people necessarily, but sometimes you'll be in the dressing room in a certain state and, somebody with the commission will try to act like, hey, we're the bosses here and we're going to tell you how it is. And then they do that. And you're not the bosses. Come on. The guy who makes the most money is the boss. They're the boss.
To your point, what are you saying? You had a stance and you were defending Jake and Logan Paul and their right to make a living in boxing because boxing has allowed this to happen.
Right. Until they start bad mouthing guys like Canelo. Now you're just like
Canelo. I don't think they really bad-mouthed guys like Canelo.
Well, when you're saying you want to fight him, that's the equivalent to me of bad-mouthing him. That's the same thing.
Like it's an insult. Fighters. He's been calling out a bunch of MMA guys and other boxers in a more disrespectful fashion. But I get what you're saying in terms of thinking you can cut in line.
Let me say that. Here's what Russ is saying. Yeah. It is an insult for him to mention Canelo's name. Him being in the ring with Canelo is an insult. It's not right. It's like he should never bring Canelo's name up. That's like, he's painting the picture for people who don't know better that he could do it. Like there's actually, because he said he wants to fight Canelo, there's people who think he could beat him. I had a guy tell me, oh, he's a lot bigger than Canelo. He hits a lot harder. And I'm like, man, like, I know you believe that. Like, I know you do. And it's hard to believe that you're a functioning human. Like, how do you get through the day? Like, it's just, Scully, it's just bizarre.
I felt the same way. And you'll remember this. I felt the same way. And this wasn't a sexist thing when they said Ronda Rousey could beat Floyd.
Right. Yeah.
You remember? Like they said she could beat Floyd. Like, I mean, that kind of stuff just bothers me, and it bothers me when I hear Clarissa say that she could beat most men and she could fight most men and beat most men. This kind of stuff, I don't care who it's coming from, men, women, when you start taking it to a complete disregard for what others have accomplished before you even came along, and you think you have the audacity that you could down talk somebody like you wouldn't get invited as a sparring partner, even the third sparring partner. You wouldn't even get that invite to be a sparring partner, let alone use his name to make money on his name. Like that's just, I just don't get it.
All that being said, though, Jake Paul made 1.5 million reported pay-per-view buys. So there's not many pro boxers now, no matter how great they are, generating that type of money. So is this type of Jake Paul and Logan Paul now in rumors and reports that he'll fight Floyd Mayweather? Logan Paul believes has not even a single win on his record, not even as good fundamentals as a guy like Jake Paul. Apparently he's going to get a Mayweather exhibition for a boatload of money. But is this going to just be a phase we're seeing now with this COVID transition and kind of all these people trying to invade the sport? Or is this going to stick? Because the disrespectful talk that the kind of wrestling community did, and it's kind of like boxing entertainment, it sells. They're generating an audience that's not boxing purists, but they're getting money, and that's where a lot of fighters and maybe retired fighters or older guys are going to maybe want to take the bait and take the fight against a guy like Jake Paul. Is this type of event here to stay, or do you think it's just going to go away as soon as Jake loses and even after this Mayweather-Logan Paul?
Go ahead, Scully.
I hope one of those guys gets decapitated, and then we don't have to worry about it anymore. Like the best thing for someone like me would be, and look, maybe he's a good guy, maybe he's just putting on an act, but if he fought someone and got stretched, I'd be happy, because it would show some people would have to realize, like, yeah, this is kind of crazy. Like, you can't just jump into the boxing game with real professionals. It's making it look like it's easy. You know what I mean? And everybody knows, and I'm sure, Russ, you had it happen at your gym in Montreal a million times. Like, some guy will walk in off the street. He's a football player. He's a street fighter. He's in a motorcycle gang. He just got out of prison, and he wants to fight. He doesn't want to learn how to fight. He wants to fight now against one of your guys, and you got to put your guy in the air to annihilate him, and then he leaves, and that's happened 100 times, in my gyms that I've been in over the years. And it's just amazing that people, it's like, it's happened so many times, but it's only happened in the gym. But now it's happening on pay-per-view. And these guys are being manipulated, and fans, we're getting a demographic of fans who are like the offspring of those people who walk into gyms and think they can fight with pros. Like, now we have fans backing it that really think it can happen, and they're going to milk it, and they're going to pick his opponents, ridiculously easy. And, and they're going to get top billing over guys who are a million times better fighters. It's bizarre.
Well, here's where I think I disagree with John. And again, I'm not sure I'm coming to the defense of it, but I see what they're doing. We all know that they're not trying to rise in the ranks of being a contender for the light heavyweight title. Like, that's not what he's trying to do. This is all about just taking his fan base from his world, who are willing to pay to watch him fight a street fight, watch him fight an exhibition. When Logan Paul fought KSI in Manchester with headgears on, they had 20,000 people there to watch that. Now, there wasn't a boxing fan in the joint, but they looked at this as a grudge match. And I think what might conceivably happen down the road, as crazy as this might sound, that there's going to be two people from some walk of life, whether it's from other sports, whether it's from the entertainment business, from the music, from movies, whatever it is, they're going to have a beef, or they're going to start something and challenge somebody else to a fight. They're going to call somebody out to a fight, and those fans that follow them are going to watch that, not because they're boxing fans, but they're going to just watch two people scrap it out. That's what I see.
It's happening right now. The singer Nick Carter, he's fighting. Is it Lamar Odom? He's fighting Lamar Odom. Nick Carter.
This is another level of extreme, like, celebrity washed up stuff happening. And
but did you see those two guys? They did a weigh-in together, and Nick Carter's like mean mugging them and trying to look like it's insane. Like, it's insane, and the people there think they're watching two superstars. It's bizarre to me. It's crazy.
I think I understand your point, but just the final one here on the Jake Paul situation and Logan Paul, these exhibitions. Do you think Scully, the fact that he's with BJ Flores, who's a former pro, coaching him seriously, Jean Pascal, who sparred, and other pro guys have sparred him, and that he seems to take the sport seriously, do you think there's any shot at all from what you saw, besides the fact he knows how to throw a 1-2? But again, people don't understand, I think, the nuances of, as you elevate and you fight real guys, they'll see the punches coming a mile away, like it's in the Matrix. No, like, or do you really think some people think if Jake Paul can have 2-3 fights against significant fighters, he can get his chance of really, kind of shortchanging his way to the real boxing world?
I mean, I would assume they're going to try and, build him up, and they're going to try and eventually fight someone recognizable, like a real fighter. He's going to have to fight a real fighter sooner or later. I would think that, and I think even as a man, and he's getting, I'll give him credit. He's training. He's really actually training. He's really sparring with real guys. Sooner or later, as a man, he's going to want to know. Like, he's going to want to fight somebody, somewhat reputable, somewhat capable. And he's going to want to find out for himself, I would imagine. So sooner or later, we're going to see something real. But I'm just saying, in the meantime, I'm going to have to listen to people like my brother, who knows nothing. Like, my brother knows zero. And he texted me, he knows nothing. And he texted me about 25 times the day of the fight, before and after the fight, talking about how strong Jake Paul is, and how this he is, and how that he is. And he seems to believe that this guy is, he was asking me, like, in your prime, if you fought him, who would win? And I'm going, come on, like I didn't even answer. I said, I'm not answering these stupid questions. Like, this is stupid.
What do you mean it's your prime? What about now, Scully?
Yeah, I mean, give me 6 months to train. Come on. I mean, really. But, I know so many pro fighters, former pros, who have messaged me and texted me, and they're like, man, you got connections. You think you can give me that fight? Like, they all want to fight us. They want to murder them. And I'm like, listen, they're not fighting you. I don't care if you haven't fought. Right. They're not fighting. Right.
I think, while they might, I think the guy, like, if I'm looking at the guy, I'm saying, oh, if he wasn't coming with this big, baggage of YouTube followers, and I looked at him, I said, hey, he's a good little fighter. He's a 4-round kid. I've seen worse 4-round fighters. I've seen worse 6-round fighters. I've seen worse 8-round fighters. He's not completely hopeless. Will he develop? Is he a blue chip prospect? Is he somebody that you're going to be able to move through the ranks and get him a shot at a title? I don't know that you could say that yet, because it takes a long time, through the amateur ranks to show that you've got the ability to be at that level. But I don't think that that's the case right now. I think they're going to keep fighting regular guys. And you know what? Even if they said they wanted to move him to a title, there would easily. He has enough talent. He's good enough and punches hard enough that they would easily be able. They would easily be able to put him in with guys, and they could get his record to 20-0 with no problem. He could easily be gotten to 20. There are 20 guys in the world that he is better than. Yeah. And I mean that they're real fighters with real pro records. There are real guys with 50-50 records, 17 wins and 9 losses. Like, there are guys that he'll eventually beat. Like, I think he has that kind of thing. But, to say he's a blue chip prospect is a big stretch.
All right. We have about 10 minutes left, gentlemen. Do you want to go straight to the 10-10 scorecard, or you want to touch on Floyd Mayweather coming back maybe for Logan Paul? We save that for another time, and we'll see if that actually happens.
We can save that. 10-10 is more important.
All right. So before I get to the 10-10 scorecard, Scully, I'd love to hear your opinion on it. And we have some feedback, of course, from Judge Benoit Roussel, who listened to last week's show. We have a sponsor, Mr. Anber, on the show, and there's some fights upcoming this weekend, including Emmanuel Navarrete fighting and defending his featherweight title. So to be sure to check out bet99.com. They're Canada's newest online sportsbook and casino. And Russ, what can you check from Mr.
They'll double your bet. Anything up. Whatever you bet up to $600, if you use the code, they will match your bet so you can double your winning. That's what I know. That's the most important thing you need to know.
Right. It's close. Let's close. Let me read it officially so we don't get into any trouble here with the fans. So be sure to check out their player props, their bet builder, their risk-free life bet bonuses. What Russ was talking about is the code BOXING99. You do that when you log in, you get a sports welcome offer, the deposit match of 100% up to $600. So you 200, they'll give you 200, 300, get a chance to make some winnings over the weekend on some of these fights, total rounds, underdogs, favorites. Take a look on bet99.com. All right, Scully. So last week, me and Russ were debating the 10-10 rounds in boxing. This is something Russ has been on for years, how 10-10 rounds should be scored more frequently. It should also not just be when it's a round that nothing happens, but also if it's a very close round, even if there's a lot of action, give it 10-10. So I want to hear your opinion first before I read Benoit Roussel's counter argument as to why 10-10 rounds are discouraged and not really happening in boxing. Do you agree with Russ that 10-10 should happen more, or you like it the way it is?
I don't know if it should be more. Well, here's what I think.
Well, hang on. That's he asked that question wrong. It's not should there be more. It's that everywhere you go, you can look at the last 5 years of boxing. You will rarely find, in all the hundreds and thousands of fights that have occurred around the world, you look at the official scorecards at the end, and there will be no 10-10 rounds, or you could probably count on one hand out of 1,000 fights, 5 rounds that were scored even. So
you would have liked them to score more 10-10 rounds in those instances, isn't it not?
Yes, but not necessarily per fight.
Right.
Not per fight.
Okay, so Scully, sorry.
I mean, there's a lot of fights that a lot of rounds that are even, like they're just simply even rounds. But I'll tell you one thing. I've judged fights, on my own, right now. Like, I'll give an example. Hagler and Leonard, that was a big controversy. And me and some guys on Facebook, we were like, all right, let's watch the fight and, score the rounds and see who we thought won. And there was a bunch of rounds where I was like, man, the only fair thing to do is make it a 10-10 because I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure who won. So for me, I feel like, me personally, if I was a judge, I might tend to use 10-10 rounds as like, I might rely on it a little too much. I might just defer to it and go, that fight was close. I can be safe and say it was 10-10. Because that would be better than picking the wrong guy. Because everybody else said, oh, you messed up. The other guy should have got that round. But it's hard to believe that there are so few 10-10 rounds because, there's a lot of close, literally even rounds.
Russ, you want me to read Benoit Roussel's comment first?
I think we should, because obviously what Benoit, you'll read it, but I think that of course I agree with what you're going to read, because that's an exercise in stupidity, what happened there, So
wait, let me read so we can have context for the viewers here.
Yes.
Okay. So in regards to the 10-10 rounds, he wrote, Russ, the Roberto Duran versus Sugar Ray Leonard in Montreal fight is the reason why you don't give 10-10 rounds. Here's one example. The scorecard of Judge Angelo Paletti was incorrectly added and announced as 147-147. He actually scored it 148-147, but in rounds he had it 3 for Duran, 2 for Leonard, and 10 even. Sports Illustrated called it at the time a monument to indecision, which is actually a pretty good quote.
It is a very good quote, and you could have put it as a monument to blatant incompetence, because you cannot find 10 even rounds in the Leonard Duran fight. There's not 10 even rounds. An even round is an even round. It's not an even round. There wasn't. So, Scully, obviously, I'm not a proponent of that. I'm not saying you sit on the fence now and you become, but that's the problem with the sport. There's so many extremes. We can also talk about the stupidity that's used for 10-8 rounds. Like we talked about this before, how 10-8 rounds are ridiculously badly scored sometimes. You get a guy who gets beaten to within an inch of his life. As long as he stays on his feet, he loses the round 10-9. You get another guy who gets tapped and he's a little bit off balance, and he loses the round 10-8. It's insane. It doesn't reflect the fight. So I don't want to necessarily go to extremes, but I'll keep it as simple as possible. And we have heard, this is a common phrase now in boxing, which has emerged, which wasn't there when I started in boxing, and I think Scully will agree, this is a new thing where it's a swing round.
Yeah, you're talking about this.
You've heard that, right? Right, Scully? It's a swing round. What's a swing round? It could have gone either way. That's an even round. When it could go either way, it's an even round. So for all the time someone has said swing round, then that should be 10-10. You can't tell me I'm okay if you gave it to this guy, but I'm okay if you gave it to that guy. That's wrong. So I'm sick of that. I'm sick of that rhetoric.
That's like flipping a coin.
Yeah. And you shouldn't win a fight because, hey, it could have gone either way. Well, then why didn't you give it to me? Why did you give it to him if it could have gone either way?
I think,
So that's all I'm saying. I know you can't go crazy given, being the monument of indecision, which is great. I agree you can't just score 10-10 rounds at willy-nilly. But when I'm watching a round and the round ends and I have to give it to somebody, if my head can't convince me that a guy won that round, that I'm justified in saying, even if the other guy landed more shots, but I felt that one punch that so-and-so landed in my heart, I can justify that. If I can't do that and I can't say why I should give it to you, what you did to earn that round, 10-10.
Yeah.
All right. I think it's a fair point. I agree with.
I can't drop this mic.
No, but that's kind of what we should have done, right? If you do drop it, we're not going to hear you for the rest of the evening, although we are closing. So any parting shots, Mr. Anber, on anything that happened in the world of boxing this week or historically? Scully, again, thank you so much for tuning in and joining us.
Ask Scully for the parting shot. I just gave my parting shot with my invisible mic drop.
Scully, go ahead. Parting shot.
Well, let me just say this real quick, because it's a subject close to us. I did a radio interview this morning, and Joe DeGuardia was on the show with me. He's the promoter for Joe Smith. So naturally, a fight between Beterbiev and Joe Smith was talked about. And he said, well, you know, Joe Smith is a very hard puncher, and he's going to bring it, and he goes for the knockout. And I'm saying, well, Arthur's kind of that way too, you know? And I said, I think, you know, it was kind of like a little battle of the wits. You know, we're trying to get in each other's head. And I said, listen, if there's ever been a more perfect fight for Arthur, I don't know what it is. Like Joe Smith, all the things you said that are going to benefit him, to me, benefit us, like his guts and his desire and all that stuff. So I'm looking, you know, because I help with Arthur in the gym. I really want to see him in a big fight. And I think Bivol is the biggest fight in the division, but Joe Smith is the best fight with Arthur. I think that's the best fight that can be made at 175. I think it'll be war. It'll be excitement. I think that'll put Arthur really on the map. So that's my parting shot today.
Yeah. It's a great one. Look forward to that event, which obviously I think makes a lot of sense with the top rank connections, and it's a realistic fight to make. And hopefully then the winner faces Bivol, and Arthur Beterbiev, one name Jake Paul will not be calling out. I can assure you. Again, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in on YouTube, the different platforms, calling Russ Anber with guest Iceman, regular guest Iceman, John Scully. Gentlemen, have a good evening, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you.
Beep, beep, beep.
Beep, beep.